Whenever you're ready.
All right, I think we're ready to start our meeting. Welcome everybody to the special meeting of the Board of Selectmen on July 21st. Let's please all rise for the Pledge of Allegiance. I pledge allegiance
to the flag
of the
of the United States of America and to the republic
for which
for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible,
with
liberty and justice
for all.
for all.
I like that flag. Is that a new addition?
No, I've had it on a couple of these.
Oh,
Yes, when I've been doing them from home. So, but it does make it a little easier.
Yeah.
So just for the public's benefit, this is a special meeting, so we don't necessarily have all the traditional things that we would have in a Board of Selectmen meeting agenda. And we are also not allowed to change the anything on the agenda today. So it's very rigid in terms of how we conduct the meeting tonight, just so the public's aware. And so going to the next item on the agenda is citizens' comments. Lauren, do we have any citizens that have joined us?
We do not have any public.
Okay, all right. There'll be an opportunity in case somebody joins us later. The next item on the agenda is to discuss and take action to declare a local civil preparedness emergency for an additional 21-day period from July 24th to August 14th. And this is the actual emergency declaration. I have a motion to discuss and take action.
So moved.
And a second?
I'll second it.
Okay, great. So for discussion, I guess I could read it first, or I know I have some just comments because I know there had been some questions from the board member about, the reason we're still kind of doing this declaration of emergency. I just wanted to talk through a couple of the points here. First of all, we're required by our charter to continue to renew every 21 days, which is why we've been doing this. I know the board is familiar with that. And then I thought I'd just share a couple of thoughts about this, and then Sam is also on the call to talk a little bit about it as well. But because I know this was, we're used to dealing with this with hurricanes, right, and snowstorms that have a very limited lifespan, and we're just in a very unique period. And so in terms of kind of reflecting on the purpose of continuing to operate under this, and I think that, number one is that, declaring it a state of emergency launches our operations plan in town government and the opening of our town emergency operations center. And that is continuing to happen now on a weekly basis. We started off 3 times a week, and now we're going to once a week, where the key members of the emergency operations team get together and go through operational issues related to COVID. And so that's kind of from a weekly operations program, how we've been operating since March when we first declared this. And then obviously our declaration mirrors where we are in the state and nation. The nation is still under state of emergency, and the state is still under state of emergency. The governor's declaration expires on September 9th. Currently, we reached out to our regional region commander who to ask how many towns, both statewide as well as regionally, still have declarations of emergency. And by far and wide, most still have declarations in place. Of the 27, I'm not sure if some towns chose not to actually do one because they don't have charters and they follow the state. So it's unclear which of the 27 that don't have declarations were just, by nature of their way they're organized, they were incapable of some way enacting some sort of declaration. And a few have chosen not to do it. I actually contacted the town of Clinton because they actually, from day one, have never declared a state of emergency. That was a decision made by the town manager. And I understand that some of their town council members disagree with that decision. So in terms of our region, 25 towns continue to have a declaration in place, and 5 have either never acted it or no longer acted it. So I don't know the details on those 5. Although I do know there's some mistakes in there because I contacted the town of Cheshire, and they actually do have a declaration in place, but it's showing as inactive in the web EOC. So that's just some data to show that we're obviously following what a vast majority of the communities in the state are doing. The other thing that we've talked ongoing about is the documentation and support of FEMA, because any of these special things that we have to do here in town and spending because of COVID and the requirements that the state is putting out requires us to spend money, and we're hoping to get a chunk of that or most of that reimbursed from FEMA. And having that local declaration of emergency is provides a lot of it just helps check the box to make sure that we're going to qualify to get reimbursement. And then there's the more broader issue of being able to take emergency measures, act quickly to mitigate problems that come out of the COVID emergency that we're in. And that includes executive orders. So if we did not renew the declaration, any executive orders would not be in good standing anymore once the declaration expires. So those are just some thoughts. And then, I know Sam is on the call. And so I know some board members had some questions. So I opened it up for discussion and questions. And I just wanted to give a little more background on that. And hopefully that answers some of the questions. I know Aaron had reached out and I had a chat with Bruce also. So I wanted to address your concerns.
Yeah, so if I could go first, that would be great. With regards to the FEMA reimbursement, is that a requirement, or are we just using it as a supporting evidence of a request?
My understanding is it's not a requirement to have a local declaration. No, it would not prohibit us from getting it. But in discussions I've had with some other town CEOs, they've indicated that, because FEMA is, it is such a bureaucratic process that you just don't want to have any stone unturned. That was the advice I had been given. But Sam has the experience. So let Sam weigh in here in terms of other hurricanes and events that we've had in town.
Yeah, and then Peggy mentioned before, obviously, we've never been in a state of emergency this long. It's only usually been for a couple of weeks. But it is supporting documentation, that we needed it for the reimbursement. It doesn't preclude us, like those other 27 towns, they can still put in, even though they didn't declare, because the president has initiated the Stafford Act and declared the emergency. So it allows everybody to put in for the reimbursement. But it is, it does help in supporting evidence. And, FEMA is very document oriented. It's the, federal government. They want, all the T's crossed and the I's dotted and everything else. So it does help. And I guess the biggest thing is the executive orders. So all those executive orders disappear if we don't renew it.
So that's a great segue, Sam. The executive orders, I was reviewing the town charter and I can't find any reference to executive orders by the office of the first. If I missed something?
I don't know what's in the town charter, to be honest with you. So I can't speak to that. But that's where the declaration does allow the select person to make these executive orders. And even though if we didn't declare, we would still be operating under our local emergency operations plan, because that's how the state is operating. The state's operating under their emergency operations plan, which kind of enacts ours as well.
I think the advice, just so you understand, the advice that I had received from town council early on in this is that this was a cleaner way to implement things that might have had to go through a process in town. It was doing it through the executive order process rather than just doing things. So these are very focused areas, and it highlights a specific thing that is waiving an ordinance, or process that we normally would have expected to go through in terms of boards or commissions. So I'm just following advice of council when we issued these about how to implement these procedures.
Fair enough. I'm just trying to reconcile what we're doing with what the charter and the governor's executive orders say. So our emergency action section 10.1.3 of the charter, it references that the Board of Selectmen may enact any ordinance and regulations it deems necessary under the circumstances, and goes on to waive the quorum rules so that meetings can be called with short notice, and those members in attendance constitute the meeting, and suspend the need to go to town meeting for stuff. And of course, these ordinances are only in effect until the state of emergency is in effect or is otherwise rescinded. And then I'm crossing that with the governor's two executive orders that speak to this issue as well, 7B and 7JJ, which is the waiving of in-person meetings and the abilities of boards of selectmen, in our case, boards of selectmen, to act as the legislative body on these types of issues. And so I'm just trying to get the connection between those three documents and our use of executive orders to date.
Is your concern that we're misusing the executive orders, Bruce? I guess I'm trying to understand what your.
My concern is the executive order mechanism doesn't exist in the town of Madison.
So I think it comes out of the local emergency operations plan.
Yeah, I mean, Bruce, that's a question. I mean, we've been living in this state since March, so I can certainly, we can certainly have a call with town council on that. I'm not prepared to answer that. This is the way we've been operating. We've continually renewed this declaration kind of regularly throughout the summer. And we're now at 6 executive orders, with, going by what we were instructed and thought was the appropriate way to do this in a unique situation, obviously. But, if you want to have that conversation, I don't think any of us are experts on our charter to say that somehow these are not the appropriate way to handle some of the decisions that are being made. So I know I'm not. I'm just following the guidelines that I've been provided by town council.
Can I jump in for a second? So to respond to your question, Scott, I don't believe that we're doing anything wrong. I believe that Peggy's power comes from state statute.
Not from the town charter.
Correct. So the town charter, I didn't find anything either that, although I have to say I didn't go through it with a fine tooth comb. I did see that it allows the board to act, but not necessarily the first select person. But even beyond that, I think where I'm coming from is just feeling like, so if we declare a state of emergency, I don't think it's an automatic that the first selectman gets to act unilaterally. My concern is that when are we going to go back to our form of government? So Madison has a form of government for a reason, and there are specific carve-outs for when we don't have to use it. And I'm just struggling a little bit with understanding what types of emergencies or action have to be taken so quickly that we can't all meet. That the 5 of us can't come together for a meeting of some kind. So that's really where I'm coming from.
Yeah,
Rather than debating the legality of it, that's where I'm coming from.
Right. Okay. Well, I think that, sorry, go ahead, Sam.
So normally, right, we wouldn't be in this state of emergency for 6 months. Like I said, it's usually a 2-week period. So we're back to normal quicker. So we're going to be in this state of emergency until at least September 9th, as long as the state doesn't extend it. And if the state extends it, we're going to be in it longer. So just because we don't declare a state of emergency in our town doesn't mean there isn't one in the state.
Well, I agree with that, but I don't think that the town of Madison is the same as making a determination about whether the state as a whole is in a state of emergency. The town of Madison is in a different place than other towns and cities in our state. So I think we there is some distinction between looking at it from a statewide level and a town level.
Well, I think you're making an interesting point, Aaron. I think we ultimately have a choice, is what we're saying. I mean, and certainly not every town in this area has chosen to get on this path and be in alignment with the state of Connecticut. So, I think we need to go in with our eyes open here and make sure that we understand why we're doing it and ensure that we have just reason for doing it. But, some of this was also seeking counsel from our town council to ensure that we're doing things the right way.
Yeah, and again, I'm not saying that we're not, but I don't believe that just because we declare a state of emergency means that the first select
the
person
state.
gets to act unilaterally.
Well,
I don't.
So that comes out of the local emergency operations plan. The authority to do comes out of the local emergency operations plan.
Yeah, and I think if you look at what actions have been taken out of the normal course, we've held all our regular Board of Selectmen meetings. We've done 90% of our routine business. Most of these have been specific issues that have been related to public health, overcrowding at our beaches. And then a few in the beginning that had to do with senior citizens having to come into our office to apply for tax relief. That was a problem, and that was a health issue, and the state had actually allowed us to do this. And then the plastic bag ordinance, which,
Right.
So really you're getting down to two things. You're getting down to the beach executive orders. And those were not unilateral decisions. Those were decisions that were made through the operations team, including the Board of Police Commissioners and the Beach and Rec Commission. So
The Beach and Rec Commission voted on that?
No, but they were included in part of the consultation on implementing all of this.
But we weren't. And,
No,
and normally,
but
under the normal jurisdiction of when you're making policy, when the town is making policy, which this falls under that, the Board of Selectmen has the jurisdiction to approve that policy or not. So we were removed from that decision-making. And I don't want to focus on that and say whether or not that was right or wrong, but I'm saying for purposes of illustration, policy making is not happening in the way that the town charter contemplates that it be made. And at some point we have to go back to normal.
But in fairness to the process, guys, we also, collectively as a Board of Selectmen, the 5 of us unanimously made a decision to extend the executive order 5 times.
Right.
Right.
But now we're faced with an option now we're faced with the question again. And that's why I think we're all talking about it. Sorry, Bruce.
Yeah, we just need to make sure we understand the why. I don't disagree.
But I just want to say though that the policy making, these were policies that we never could have enacted without being under a state of emergency. You see what I'm saying? We could, the town council never have allowed us to have these policies, probably if we were not in a state of emergency, because of the health issues. So it's like a chicken and egg, No,
it's not, because we can have a state of emergency and still have the board acting under our town charter. So it doesn't have to be one or the other.
Right.
But I guess I'm looking at this also, Aaron, and I understand if you're concerned, and we can talk more about the having more collaboration and involvement in this, but this is how a lot of these specific policy decisions are mirroring what other towns across the entire state are doing. They're not having their Board of Selectmen do it. It's through executive orders. So, but I understand.
Do you have data on that? Because that would be interesting.
The one that just came out Friday was an executive order. And the ones in Milford were executive orders on the most recent policies that came out. So I can go back and research it. When we did all of this, one of my bars was, to look at what other communities are doing. We're always looking at what other communities are doing and learning from their policies, and then adapting and refining them so that they align with Madison, they fit Madison. In terms of the involvement of the board in these policy decisions, the most recent executive order, literally, we had that Monday, and we can talk more about the beaches, but that I'm sensing that because if you look at the list of executive orders, the only ones I can imagine that you're concerned about are the beach related ones, right? Because everything else is pretty.
No, it's not, I'm not trying to criticize what's been
Yeah.
done, but I'm just looking forward because now we're presented with a question of whether or not we want to continue operating in this way. And
Right.
I'm just not sure I believe that we are in such a state of urgency that we can't come together as a 5-person board to decide to make a decision on some high level policy matters that fall under the jurisdiction of the board as a whole under our charter. So that's where I'm.
So to that point, it doesn't matter, to be honest with you, if you don't declare a declaration, if you don't extend it, the state is still under one, so we're still going to operate under our local emergency operations plan.
But
That's
that's
what we're
what I'm saying,
operating under
Sam.
now.
We can still vote for a state of emergency, but that doesn't automatically mean that the first select person can act unilaterally.
Well, it does underneath the local emergency operations plan. And that's what I'm trying to tell you. Doesn't matter if Madison declares it or not, we're still in one for the state. So we're operating under the local emergency operations plan and all the authorities are laid out in that plan.
Okay,
And
so I'd
and-
like to see a copy of that because that's not what the charter says, but maybe that.
I
Maybe that's
understand that. And listen, when these plans are put together, it was never intended to have a 6-month declaration of emergency.
Right.
You know, we're in a unique situation. So I'm sure that when we go through this, the after actions, there's probably going to be revisions to the plans to say that, if we have another pandemic, that you might have a hybrid system of where, all right, your board of selectmen are getting back together. I don't know. This is all new territory for all of us.
Right. No, I understand.
And I think that really is the bigger point, Sam, is that while, in the early days, I think I was probably one of the biggest advocates for jumping right to a state of emergency and absolutely supported our past actions. I think that, I look at where we are today and what would it take for us to declare things normal and anything short of a vaccine with just about everybody vaccinated is going to be our current state. And we need to start looking today for some sort of normalization of how we conduct our business as a board, how we conduct our municipal government. And I think that's the beginning of this conversation.
And listen, nobody wants that more than I do.
Stressed to hear that
Me. So.
operations.
What was that?
Declaration trumps the town charter. That's news to me. I didn't know that when we declared an emergency that the obligations of the charter were suspended and superseded by another document.
So, I mean, we can get clarification from town council, but as
Yeah,
far as
I
I
think
know,
that's
that's
where
where
we
we've
need-
always done it.
I
think that's where we all want to go here.
Yeah.
Let's hear from town council at our next meeting about how these various state statutes and regulations impact us during a time of crisis like this, and whether or not they supersede the charter or complement it. I'd love to hear from town council on all this.
But so my bigger concern is that, they paused phase 3, right? The state put the brakes on, opening stuff up. Everything could change next week.
No doubt.
We could be back at phase 1.
I
So,
know.
even though things seem good around Madison, we're not out of the woods yet. We're still getting positive cases. I mean, they're not like they were in the beginning, but we're still getting positive cases.
Well, and somebody raised the question earlier just about the definition of normal. I mean, how would we define what is normal to our town if in fact we still have cases, if in fact HAMO is still at 25%, if in fact we're still wearing masks in town? I think the definition of normal is going to be sort of hard to wrap our head around, I think.
Right. But I think there's 2 ways of looking at it. We continue operating as we have been, and then someday when we decide to go back to normal, we go back to our form of government, or we go back to acting as a board. And then if one of those things happens that Sam just mentioned, and things do escalate, we can always go back to giving Peggy unilateral authority to make emergency decisions.
Well, I think that we should be you know, understanding some of the nuances and concerns about what this means for our town government, I'm just scratching my head a little bit because I look back to, you know, the unilateral, you're using the term unilateral decisions, and basically there's been.
I just mean without, it's not a board decision. That's all I mean. I'm not saying you're not consulting
Yeah.
with people. I'm not saying that you're, you know,
Well,
not, I'm
no,
just saying that it's not a board action.
But
That's what I mean.
I think right, and I guess that you have to weigh that with the handcuffing the operations of the town to do things in a quick manner during a state of emergency, to react. I mean, things have developed very rapidly here, and you know, it is at times, time is of the essence sometimes to implement policies and to make changes quickly to protect citizens. And so, you know, like I said, a lot of we've been doing a lot of operational things. I was actually pondering, like, okay, we closed the senior center. You know, we did a lot of things operationally that I don't know if those would require Board of Selectmen action to close for an indefinite period of time a town facility. I'm not sure. Is that an operation decision or is that a board decision? I'm not sure.
Yeah, so I think, Peggy, that clearly falls into an operational decision that
Right.
that sits with you. If you were to say I'm closing it forever, then that would be a different thing. But a temporary closure and an abundance of caution, I think, rests squarely with you and always does, even in a non-state of emergency.
So Peggy, how do you know when something needs an executive order then, and when you can just do it out of, like, the senior center? And I'm asking, I don't know the answer. I'm like, really
you know, typically I've consulted with town council, and like I said, the only times I felt I was going into questionable territory was on the beach. Well, clearly the plastic bag, because that was a town ordinance, right? The state
Yeah.
had already, and our ordinance was more strict, right? So if we have something that's more strict than the state, then clearly that was going to require, now we could have put the board together, but that was done back in, I don't remember when it was. When was it? I have it on here somewhere. Back in, I think we implemented it in April and then rescinded it in June. So it really gets down to beach policy. And what I found and what I'm learning throughout this process is that you'll see later in the numbers, the beach, this particularly the last 2 weeks, required quick action. And you'll see the volume of numbers that changed dramatically within a week or two period. So that was one where when I spoke to, but I just didn't do it. We had a task force meeting about this with the chief of police, with the board of police commissioners, and the chair of the Beach and Rec Commission. So these were operational decisions. Now, are some of these, you know, policy questions? I'm not sure. I even was wondering, would it require an ordinance to have a residents only policy, or is that really the police commissions under the local traffic authority? So there's a few areas that the executive order kind of just made it simple, right?
Mhm.
To get to take action quickly and implement quickly. And that's really it. If I look at the list, otherwise it's just been operational decisions, policy decisions. We've had our regular meetings. We voted on any kind of financial stuff. We've not done anything outside of what is allowed, except for under executive orders when we did the budget, and we did other things that have avoided town meeting. Any ordinance issues would have to go through town meeting, and we're still in a situation where we can't have a town meeting. So if we're going to enact,
No, I don't think they do, Peggy. I don't think they do have to go through town meeting under the charter.
But that's my point. So we're setting up you want to have it normal, but we can't have it normal. And so we can't pick, I guess, we're picking and choosing when we want normal is my point, right? So certain things we can't do normal because of ordinances, right? Because they would have to go to town meeting. So
Right, but the governor's issued 2 executive orders that give us relief from those requirements, regardless of our state of
right.
emergency.
Isn't it helpful to have executive orders to do that? So
but
I guess
but
that's
the
what I'm
governor-
saying. So I'm saying that, by taking away the ability of the first selectman to issue executive orders, that we don't have that avenue at times. You're taking away a tool that we can use to do things quickly. The governor's doing executive orders so that we can get through bureaucracy and get things done quickly. So that's my point.
Yeah,
And
it's-
But
Yeah,
the
so-
governor, the state government is a representative form of government, and we are not. We are a town meeting form of government. We're a fundamentally different legislative body. So I have complete respect for whatever authority the governor is exercising. I think maybe to pick up on Aaron's bigger theme, it's how do we get our municipal government functioning more in a way that it was envisioned, and the way that it has been running. I appreciate everything that you've said with regards to the hows and whys of taking these actions. And quite frankly, I think in the moment, I don't really have a quarrel with them. I think my issue is, do we need to continue in that mode moving forward? So I'm not looking to second guess what's been done. It's how do we move forward? And I look at the first statement in our emergency declaration, and it says growing number of infections, and in fact that is not true, right? The latest data that I saw from the governor was 23,000 tests were done in the state with 160 positives. And I believe we don't have any new positives in the town of Madison. I'm not suggesting that things couldn't change tomorrow, but our statement says
Right now, we have 8 active cases in the town of Madison.
that we have a growing number of infections in Connecticut and shortages of supplies. I'm not sure that was true. That was very true recently. I'm not sure it's true today.
well, I think that the reality is that we could be in that move. We can be in that position tomorrow. I'm just looking at this from a practical standpoint. Look, in my view, it is good policy and good government to continue in the state, and a vast majority of the towns in the state are operating under this. We're not unique, we're not different. So
What do you mean by that, Peggy? You mean they're operating under a state of emergency, or do you mean that they're operating and that they've abandoned their typical form of government?
how have we been? I'm saying that they're operating under a state of emergency.
Okay.
So what when you
Well,
say
because that's different, because they're not one and the same. So that's why I was just
Right.
asking.
And I'm also looking at the fact that how have we not done, I would say 95% of what we have done over the last 3 months have been normal course of business.
Well, we haven't really,
Focusing on-
we
But you're
haven't done too much because everything's been pretty much, most of it has been COVID related.
absolutely, that's because we're in a state.
Right.
of
So we have
emergency.
not
So-
we have not had, that has taken front, which
Well, we
arguing
are-
is-
Which to me, guys, would indicate that we're not normal.
Right,
It's
exactly.
normal.
But other things on tonight's agenda are about, operating normally. You go back to all the agendas over the last 3 months. We talked about the downtown center project. We provided updates on a lot of different things.
how many actions have we taken as a board in the last 4 meetings?
We voted on contracts.
It's one thing, Peggy, for you to come and inform the board about a decision that's already made. That's not the same thing as acting as a board.
Well,
Aaron, let me ask you this question though. What has changed in the last 21 days? I mean, as we're approaching the need to do this the next, what changed from the last time we re-upped this that's
It's-
causing the concern?
It didn't change. I think this has been an ongoing thing. It's been discussed at previous meetings, the issue of at what point are we going to, are we just going to follow the state? Are we going to, at what point are we going to vote differently or to change it?
See, I don't remember
So-
ever having a conversation about it. It just
We
seemed like
did.
the 5 of us were aligned and we did.
No,
So
we absolutely did. Bruce said the last time he had no objection with approving the order, and nor did I, but that at some point he wanted to talk about when we had to start thinking about and talking about when things were going to go back to normal. I mean, I'm just using that word. We can argue what it means,
Yeah.
but you know what, I think you know what I mean. And we were absolutely all on board with it. And I'm not saying, and again, I'm not going back and saying that wasn't, that I'm not second guessing that. I'm just saying, you've asked us to vote, not you, Scott. We have been asked to vote on this. And so you want me to just rubber stamp it, or do you want me to say like, well, okay, this is what I think. Like, this is what.
Let me just say, since our last meeting, guess what? We paused the reopening plan. The state has paused the reopening plan. I mean, we're in like this steady eddy. So there's really hasn't been a big change in terms of the level of COVID. In terms of a lot of stuff is going on in town government, but it's operational. In terms of public policy, no, I have not focused on, the Island Committee's been meeting. We're going to have at our next meeting, the Government Studies Committee report. We have to talk about the, obviously, eventually Academy, but I don't think anybody in the world it has an appetite to deal with some of those big public policy issues. You're also more than welcome to request a topic to be put on the agenda. If there's an specific area of policy that you want the board to act on, there's been no need, there's been no ordinances that have come before us. There's been no policy other than trying to survive COVID right now and make sure we get through this. That's been the goal, right? Is to try to keep the town moving forward through the different phases, keep people safe, and keep things as operational and get things back to normal as possible. That's really just been the focus. So if there's specific things, we have a meeting on Monday that you feel we need to talk about. I told Bruce already, we'll talk about the budget process, even though it's months before it's ever been discussed in the history for next year's budget, but we're going to talk about it. Tonight, we're talking about operational things. We're going to be talking about early retirement programs and police contract negotiations, which, by the way, a lot of things got postponed from March and April, May, because we were in COVID. And no one was doing anything except figuring out how to order plexiglass. So I appreciate your frustration.
I'm not frustrated. I'm not frustrated.
Okay, well, I think that I'm just saying that I will continue to stand by the need, and I feel that we are doing the appropriate thing by renewing this declaration. And I think that, we can have this discussion every 3 weeks, and there might be a point where my opinion might change on that. I haven't seen that right now, but you as all board members can make your independent views on that. I think this is good government. It makes sure we get reimbursed for things. It allows us to act quickly if we need to. And it's also in line with what a vast majority of towns in the state of Connecticut are doing.
Peggy, I think Sam wanted to say something.
Let's add one thing. So even if you don't pass this declaration tonight, it's not going to change how we operate. We're still under the state emergency operations plan, which enacts our local emergency operations plan. So the only thing you're going to do by getting rid of the declaration is you're going to get rid of all the executive orders that are in place to help out with the beaches and stuff like that. That's the only thing that's going to change.
So you're talking about the executive orders that are on this slide right here. Every one of them goes away.
Yes, they all go away.
Well, right, but but it doesn't have to be approved as written.
Well, and I disagree with that, because I think the governor's orders provided the justification for these actions. I think these actions.
It actually did. Actually, it was actually state statute that allowed Peggy to do that.
But he's not doing stuff for the beaches and stuff, whatever, the residents only stuff. He's not doing that. So that's really the decision you have to make. We're not going to change the way we operate until September 9th, until the state's declaration of emergency goes away, and they might extend it after that. I'm not sure. That was brought up in one of the calls. We don't know what they're going to do.
Well, but Sam, I don't know about that. I would have to consult with town council, because I don't know what actions now I would be able to take quickly. Even if
you won't be able to do an executive order.
Right. So
I'd like to make a suggestion. I'd like to suggest that we go ahead with a vote tonight to continue the emergency, but that we invite town council to our next meeting to help us figure out when is it time to end the emergency and resume the normal charter-driven government. I think we need some outside guidance to help us know what is that point in time that we recognize we're no longer in an emergency. I don't think we can figure that out tonight on our own. I think there's too many other statutory and regulatory considerations here. So I'd like to see us continue this discussion, but have more information available to us. But for tonight, I'm continuing to advocate that we move ahead with this vote.
Hey, Peggy, can I just add something in, please?
Yep.
Just listening in, I just want to add in maybe to hopefully provide some help for, or just clarification for Erin. I get where she's coming from, and maybe not in relation to the government part, but in terms of normal and the state of emergency, at least going on in Madison, we are having positive cases right now. We've actually saw some cases with, you know, our younger adults, which was a little alarming over the past 2 weeks. Some 20-year-olds, 19-year-olds, and we recently were hearing evidence of Governor Lamont issuing a travel advisory and a quarantine. We're heading into another direction. I think it's worth looking at that and understanding what that's going to mean. Schools are submitting plans to reopen. So this means that there may be we may be in school this fall. We may not be hybrid. We might not be virtual. So I think having the emergency extended, it just merits opportunity to make decisions. I think from a government perspective to protect the health and safety of everybody in town, because we don't know what that's going to mean with Governor Lamont's quarantine. We don't know if we're going to have to start doing things in town or observe places for individuals to quarantine. We're just talking about homeless shelters today in our EOC update. There's a lot of things that we don't really know. And I don't think council is going to be able to know when to not extend that either.
Yeah.
So that's a little bit all I had to say, but that's all I had.
Yeah, I appreciate it. I guess I'm just kind of struggling a little bit with what it is that we couldn't do as a board. I guess I'm still not understanding what we couldn't quickly come together as a board, because a lot of those things sound like they're operational, which would mean that we don't need that Peggy could do those anyway. And I'm not talking about not having a state of emergency. There's a specific paragraph in what we're voting on that talks about Peggy being able to act by executive order. So I'm not arguing that we shouldn't approve the state of emergency as a concept. I hear what you're saying, and I think it makes sense.
So are you recommending changes to the declaration, which I think is was written by our town council? I'm just saying that, you know, we're in the 11th hour. It's here in front of you. It's the same thing that's been, you know, routinely done for 3 weeks. So I could not support amending a document that we've been supporting for months and has been reviewed by council. I think Al offered an opportunity to, you know, we talked about this the last meeting, but then, you know, I don't know what information you're the ones questioning. So if you need answers to specific questions, I don't have all the answers. We can set up a call with town council, and, you know, we can work through this over the next 3 weeks, and maybe we don't renew in 3 weeks. Right. But I'm coming kind of out of left field. We've talked about it. You know, I've given you the reasoning. But if this is gets into legal or changing the declaration, I think that is a more complicated thing that we would need to do.
Right. But to be fair, Peggy, it's not left field. I emailed you and the rest of the board last Tuesday asking for exactly this information. And tonight.
No, you just said you wanted to know why, and I talked to you about it. I mean, if you want to talk to council and go through this level of detail, then pick up the phone and say, I want to talk to town council. Here are my issues. You didn't give issues. You just asked a broad-based question. You need to ask specific things that we can answer. just say why. And I told you on the phone why. I said this, and this. I spoke to town council, the executive orders wouldn't stand. Most towns are operating under this. This could impact our FEMA reimbursement. Those were the reasons. And I just listed the same things on the slide. The executive orders are all posted on the town website. So all the orders are there. You've been copied as soon as they were issued. So if there's specific issues, then, you got to give me more notice than all of a sudden at the 11th hour saying you're uncomfortable voting on this. So I just would recommend Al, I think, had a sensible approach. And now we can go into the next time when we have to renew this. You can have all the conversations you need. And at least it's, not putting us in a situation where, some of this stuff, this policy that is tied to an executive order goes away.
I think that's where my uncomfort is. If we don't vote for it now, I'm worried about these current executive orders, given that they all are very much health related. I mean, to me, given that we're in a state of emergency and that the focus right now is on the health and safety of the town residents, I'm uncomfortable undoing things in this particular case without full knowledge as to why we need to undo them.
And I think you can explain to the people at the beaches this weekend why all of a sudden we're selling daily beach passes to non-residents again. And there's no capacity restrictions. I mean, I'm just saying we can have this, debate, I think, after we get all your questions answered. I can't answer your questions tonight.
Okay, I'm fine with approving it tonight. I would love the opportunity to talk to town council and get some of my questions answered. So it sounds like you're saying that's okay to do. So I'm happy with taking Al's approach. I think we've had a very good, healthy discussion, and I think this is what we should be doing. So I think everyone's heard everyone's different points of view, and we can, continue it at the next time we're asked to renew it.
Are we suggesting that we would individually go to town council, or I thought I had also heard Al suggest maybe that town council might come to us and we might have a group session where we can benefit from each other's conversations?
I think that's a better idea, and I'm a little uncomfortable with sort of the 5 of us having independent access to council. I'm not sure that that's a good.
Well, then you get into the telephone game a little bit too, Bruce, which I worry about, right? That we're sort of translating what town council did to each other as opposed to maybe all hearing it the same way.
I didn't know there was a desire on everyone's part to talk to town council. I thought it was just me because I'm a legal geek, because I'm a lawyer. So that's fine if you want to do it as a group.
Well, I just think, especially when we're talking about how different components of town government stitch together, from the state level to the charter to this emergency operations plan, and what supersedes each other. I just think I think we all need to sort of get our arms around how they all relate to each other and which one sort of trumps, no pun intended.
Right. Well,
I think
we have a meeting on Monday, so we can just schedule that on Monday for Monday's meeting, is for him to be at that meeting. Because that
Perfect.
way we put it on there, and then there's no declaration on the agenda. And then, there's an opportunity to at least address this prior to actually having to vote on it.
Can we submit questions in advance to him? Like, what?
Yes.
Okay, perfect.
I mean, that's been an opportunity to do all along, so absolutely. I'll make sure, I'll double check that Floyd can join us next Monday. If he can't, then we'll figure out another way to do it.
I already emailed him, Peggy, so as soon as I hear back, I will let you all know.
That's an evening meeting next week, Lauren?
Yes, starts at 7.
Okay. Okay, so can we take this to a vote?
Yes.
Yes.
Okay, all in favor of renewing the declaration of emergency renewal, say aye.
Aye.
Hi.
Okay, great. Passes. Let's move on. Speaking of beaches, I wanted to provide and have Scott join us, and we have Chief Drum, because we've all been working very hard. And Lauren, is Scott Erskine also on the call? Because I've got my screen share up. I can't see.
I'm here. You can't really see me though.
Okay, no, that's okay. I've got on the screen real quickly, and maybe this is a good segue since we talked about some of this, that, I think this is really a summary for the public. And a lot of this I've stated in my communications to the public about why we're having problems this year. What are the challenges? Hammonasset, is been a problem. It's a severe problem now. They are out of 6,000 parking spots, they're only opening 1,500 to 2,000. And then they're continually closing the facility. It's very unpredictable. It's happening during the week. It's happening on the weekends. And then statewide, the state has closed a lot of inland swimming facilities, and a lot of towns have very restricted access to their swimming facilities and ponds and public pools. So there's just not a lot of places to go to get wet because of COVID. In addition, the governor's quarantine requirements has made it very problematic for people to go on vacation. So people are not going away. They're staying in Connecticut. We've seen that with some of our own town employees, because we said, if you choose to go on vacation in a state that is under the quarantine restrictions, you will have to use your vacation time when you come back. So the quarantine issue is really impacting people's ability to travel and visit. And it's making people want to stay close to home for visits for their vacations. Obviously for families, there's limited summer camps, other recreation activities, camping, things like that. Everything's just at a much lower level of availability. Last week, Rhode Island started requesting that Connecticut and Massachusetts residents don't go to its beaches and slash their parking capacities to 25%, which is where we've been throughout this entire pandemic. So that has put pressure in Connecticut, because a lot of Connecticut people go up to Rhode Island for the day to visit their facilities, and Massachusetts people do the same. So now they're coming to Connecticut. So this has meant obviously huge demand, lots of car and pedestrian traffic, huge demands on our staff and public safety resources. And we're having to continually adapt and change policies and operational aspects to address this volume. And here's just some numbers, which Scott, this is from sent me a couple days ago. I know he's trying to get the fill-ins for, but it shows basically they've been tracking how many cars go through the gates, and then they've been tracking how many cars they're turning away. They've been tracking at all gates, but I think the breakdown, Scott, you were going to get me as soon as you could before July 4th. For some reason, we just have consolidated numbers here. But I think what it shows you is, since we started tracking this when beach stickers were first required, we've turned away, 2,600 cars from our gates. And in particular, when this first started happening, that was probably because people still didn't know the beach pass policy. So you see an anomaly up in the upper right-hand corner at 230 cars were turned away on June 20th, which is the first day the policy was implemented. Then you go into July 4th, then you kind of get very nominal numbers, a little blip here and there. Then you go into the July 4th holiday, and we started on July 5th. And I think July 4th was not as nice a weather. July 5th was nicer weather. We turned away 220 cars. Then all of a sudden, the next weekend, boom, July 12th. And this is where I felt we were needing to take immediate action, because I was myself at the beach. East Wharf, if you look over the East Wharf column, turnaways at the gate, 199 cars were turned away that day at the gate. More than
Wow.
Surf Club, more than at West Wharf, which typically I would have thought would have been the higher turnaround places, because you have Christie's, you've got the hotel. It was unbelievable. So we got slammed for some reason on this weekend. And that's when I did ask our team to come up with a quick, rapid response. The beaches were overcrowded. I felt it was unsafe. We had never felt a need to have capacity limitations. We felt people were social distancing and the volume levels were manageable. But obviously, for some reason, things started to really change starting July 4th over the next, and obviously it's July, right? And the weather's hot, but I just was kind of stunned to see what had happened. You look at the turnaways and you look at the total cars that went through our gates throughout the day. That was our peak, was that day. So this weekend during the heat wave, we continued to see high numbers. So we've got, you know, on Saturday, we had 943 cars go through our gates. We turned away 259. And on Sunday, which Sundays seem to have been worse at East Wharf, and that is true in terms of the numbers. We turned around 259 cars. 117 of that was at East Wharf. So there was a problem. And it was more, and it kind of came, I think, because of the fact you had phase 3 being paused, you had quarantine restrictions, you had summer heat, and you had other places starting to crack down. When we did a lot of our policies, the hope was that in July, you know, Hammonasset would have 75% of their parking spaces open. Rhode Island had 75% of their parking spaces open. Hammonasset never moved. They never opened up any more spots. And we've had regular calls with Deep about this. So, and then just on the bottom, it highlights, you know, what our available parking is. East Wharf only has 50 parking spots. So we had not been tracking walk-ins because we didn't feel there was really a problem. Well, we started tracking walk-ins. And Scott, I don't know if they had time. So they actually have clickers, individuals going in and out this past weekend to track numbers. And we came up with some capacity type guidelines, partly based on state guidance. And then we said there's tides to deal with, and there's how people are spreading themselves out at each of these beaches, which are quite unique. They have piers, they have, you know, different sizes. So, so we came up with some ideas, and this was all through, you know, this discussion was all through with the police, with Beach and Rec, with Sam and his team. So Scott, I don't know if you want to add some color on walk-in numbers or, you know, just to show where we are. It's intense. It's, you know, it's.
Yeah, it's definitely intense. What is happening is that people are lining up 5 o'clock in the morning, if not earlier, to get into Hammonasset. And then they're hitting Google as soon as those gates close. And when you do a Google search, the first one that shows up is East Wharf Beach. So they're going there, they're coming down, we're turning them around. You know, it's resident only parking on the weekends, but they want to drop off, they'll go find a parking space. So they're walking in. So we started this weekend with counting people, not the cars. And between everybody and Sam, we were monitoring it all day. Saturday, we did not close. And Sunday at East Wharf, we ended up closing once for about 45 minutes, where people shifted out, left, and then we reopened. And we were fairly steady the rest of the day, but it didn't get over capacity of what we had determined to be the capacity, because the tide was going out. So there's still plenty of sand if people moved around to keep the spacing properly.
Hey, Scott, I just trying to understand the numbers here. I'm looking at the Westgate numbers for the 18th and 19th.
Mm-hmm.
And I read this to be that on the 18th, we admitted 113 cars over the course of the day.
Yeah.
So you were having turnover on the 27 spots.
Correct.
And in addition to that, a total of 701 people were dropped off and walked onto the beach, or parked somewhere else
throughout the day. Throughout the day, yes. Going in and out. Whether then those are people that are walking in, they may be turning around after they look at the water, spend a couple of minutes, and then they walk out.
So are we supposed to infer some sort of crowd size on the beach from this number, or?
Well,
No.
we end up closing up when the beach areas are at capacity.
What we've been doing is we assess, once we hit a certain number, we're still kind of, we have like a threshold number, then a supervisor assesses the situation. and says, is this a problem? And then they look around and say, you know what, I think we're okay to go another 25 people. And then we allow that because it really requires an assessment. West Wharf is particularly, we don't have the other gate walkers numbers in here yet. But West Wharf in particular is tough because it is a lot of in and outs, right? Because people just walk down to take a look. They're focusing on the beach when they make the call to close the beach.
Right. And do we think some of those 700 people are walking down to the surf club?
Possibly.
Oh, I'm sure they are.
I haven't seen a lot of walkers to the surf club. The surf club has not been, at least in my opinion, and Scott, you and I have talked about this, has not really been a problem.
But do we
No,
know
I
whether or
mean-
not people are walking from from West Wharf to the surf club via the beach?
And that's what I mean. That's what I was.
Yeah.
There may be some, predominantly with the surf club with walkers, they're mainly parked there first thing in the morning and they're doing the beach route and then walking back and getting in their cars and then they're going home. They aren't down there first thing in the morning to stay the full day. It's just the loop. They walk surf club to West Wharf to East Wharf, may go all the way up to Waterbury Avenue, and then they turn around. It's their exercise route.
So we're not really worried about those people then because they're not parking on the beach.
Correct. That's it. That's where our issue is, especially at high tide, and we're going to be establishing that capacity level. This past weekend, we had high tide in the morning, and then it started going out throughout the day. So this next weekend, it's flip-flop, I think.
Can I ask a question with regard to our efforts to get Hammonasset to increase capacity? Because so they're limiting capacity for Hammonasset because of obviously COVID related reasons. But as a result, the capacity of the Madison beaches is going up.
Exactly.
Which also violates
Direct result. Yeah.
COVID. So we're now we're still putting people at risk. It's just that we're shifting it. Have we talked, has Christine Cohen been involved in these efforts to
Yes.
get the state? Yeah, and there's just
we've had calls with the commissioner. We've had calls with the deep law enforcement. I actually have sitting in my office a draft letter to the commissioner. I wanted to send the data attached to this. And so I have a letter drafted that is going to just outlaw. We verbally have communicated these problems many times and had discussions, but I was also going to send a formal letter, and I just wanted to see, get the pedestrian walk-in numbers before I sent the letter to include that with them. So, because I feel like it's better to have this argument and support it with data. That's not perception, it's reality. They actually had requested that we close Salt Meadow to help them with their capacity. And I just, the chief and I had a long discussion with them, and we said, if we close Salt Meadow, those 108 cars that park there are then going to either park on our local roads, or they're going to try to hit up a Madison beach. So, and I just feel they have way more land mass to absorb 108 cars than we do.
Well, not to mention then closing Salt Meadow to our local townspeople as well.
Right. So they're struggling, but they are just, the other problem is they opened up camping, which I think was a mistake because that created a permanent group of beachgoers that are there for the week. And, that's just kind of created more of a problem. So
at least they opened Chatfield Hollow this weekend.
They did. They opened some of the inland stuff. So that might have helped a little bit why the numbers dropped a bit, even though it was a heat wave. If you look at the East Wharf numbers, they dropped from 199 to 117. It is a problem. And I wanted to get these numbers finalized and presented nicely before I sent this letter. The board would be copied on this. I was copying the board and then Noreen and Christine on the letter as well. And that kind of goes into, if we go to the next you know, this just summarizes all the steps we've already taken to do what we can, because it's frustrating, I think, for all of us, and particularly for me, when I hear do something, you're not doing anything about this. And this is everything that we're doing. And we've done a lot to try to mitigate this, but the numbers are just overwhelming. And it's just the nature of COVID, the situation that we're in, that people are staying home and wanting to go to the beach.
You're saying that members of the public are saying you're not doing enough?
Oh, yeah.
That hasn't come from anyone internally.
No,
Right.
this is from the email please that I get, the Facebook posts that I see, or the pings I get through Messenger. You know, I think last weekend helped a lot of the initiatives that we took, the 3-point plan that we took, you know, that I kind of communicated on Wednesday, has helped. You know, but there's some other things we're going to do, like just refine it and watch. There's a lot of people that are focused on the fact that some towns in Connecticut have taken an additional step to not allow non-residents at all on the beach, even if you walk in. And there are a lot of residents that have been reaching out, asking why we're not implementing that policy. And so,
aren't we prohibited from doing that? That was my understanding.
I mean, this is the whole issue of, you know, there's a good New Haven Register article that actually, that I don't know, Al, maybe you could forward that to the entire board. Gus Horvath sent it to me this morning. I didn't get to read it because I don't subscribe until about an hour ago. But it talks about the fact that in normal times, it would not be legal. You know, people are using COVID as a rationale, which is a fair argument you can make, that this is, you know, crowding issue, keeping people, you know, protected from, I don't know. It's a way to try to keep crowds down. It's another tool that some of these towns are using to keep crowds down. So far, what we're doing, I think, is much more common throughout the state. It's what all our neighbors are doing. They're doing capacity limits, but they're still not restricting people to walk in who aren't citizens or aren't residents. To not allow residents walk-ins would mean we'd have to have some sort of identification process now for people. It would be a really complicated thing to roll out, and I feel uncomfortable, and it's not something that our council would advise us to do at this stage. You
Bring
know,
back the cards.
yeah, well, I got a lot of that, but you know, you now have to have a process for people to get those cards. You've got a lot of taxpayer non-residents, right? So to implement this overnight would be really difficult. We'd have to really it would take weeks to really get something in place.
Peggy, I don't know if I missed it, but what are we doing about enforcing non-parking, illegal parking on streets adjacent to the beach, streets impacted by this?
That would be Jack.
Yeah, is Jack on here?
Yeah.
I had a question for him too.
I didn't quite hear the question. Was that Bruce? Go ahead.
Yeah. So are we taking any actions with regards to enforcing no parking, emergency no parking, you know, anything like that on the streets impacted by this?
Or hourly restrictions, 2-hour parking? We doing any of that?
Most of the roads are parked, no parking already, at least since I've been here. Some discussions have come up with some of the various roads. What we're doing is replacing signs that have been taken down through the years, some even by homeowners because they don't like the sign in front of their house. So we reinforce by putting the signs back. There is a conundrum where people that live on certain roads they don't have parking as the homes, they park on the road. Those are residents. At some point, we're going to mitigate our way through that. As far as 2-hour parking, a question that comes up quite frankly is like Bird Bomb Lane, which I've heard some folks ask to have a 2-hour parking. Well, if you look at the history of that and the LTA, which is myself and the police commission, we have looked at and reviewed that on 3 occasions since I've been here 11 years.
The problem we have is that the businesses that are there along Route 1 and some of the people that work downtown, they park their cars there while they go to work. So that allows the parking behind their businesses or the parking in front of their businesses for customers. For us to make that 2 hour, we're now going to penalize those folks who live and work in this town. That's why the traffic authority did not take any action on that, and we're not going to take any action on that. We're going to continue to allow parking there. It is marked through traffic only. I think that we've gone to extraordinary means during these extraordinary times to reduce and mitigate the flow of traffic through the beach areas. We've already spent approximately $51,000 in overtime since COVID cast upon us on mitigating the influx of people to our beaches. We've had numerous discussions with Hammonasset folks about the beaches and the implication of them reducing attendance to the state beach. It's the same story every time we leave a meeting with them. And no matter who attends the meeting, who writes the letter, they don't have the money. They don't have the money for staff. They're going to maintain what they have. That's it. So I think to sum this up, we're using best practices. We've done one heck of a job of mitigating what could be a lot worse. Do I think we go any further? No. I think we've kind of maxed out what we could do law enforcement wise without interfering with people's civil rights. That's where I'm at.
Hey, can I ask a question?
Sure.
Not to you, Jack, specific. I'm changing subjects, but people can come back to this if they want. Scott, I think more for you or for Peggy, but the gate situation at Salt Meadow and at Lowry, and have we dealt with sort of the residents parking at Lowry relative to not having a beach pass and using that as a way to sort of sneak in?
So
You want me to get that, Peggy?
go ahead. It's on
Okay.
the bullet point.
We have
I saw-
we have fencing on order as well as a gate. Right now we have snow fence, and we're following the Little League schedule. And when they are done on Saturday and or Sunday, we pull a truck and a trailer across the opening. So it is closed.
Nice.
People
The fact
watching
of the
over it.
matter is, sorry,
Excuse me?
but the fact of the matter is that the issue is not really people getting in without paying, because there's a lot of people going in without paying. They're walking in, right?
Mhm.
Yeah, but it's the car parking too.
It's just enabling more walk-ins.
Right.
You know,
And people potentially not buying their beach pass.
right.
Yeah.
And it's well, go ahead.
I was going to ask Jack a question about people parking downtown in some of those 2 hour spots that you were talking about, or we were talking about, and then walking on streets such as East Wharf without any sidewalks, you know, in groups with coolers and chairs. And have you seen, I mean, I've only witnessed it a couple of times because I was driving by, but in your experience, is that an issue? And are there safety concerns with the number of people who are doing that?
Can you hear me? I hear for some of the residents that they see it as a traffic concern, a safety concern. I guess if they're recklessly walking, it could be, but we have people that regularly walk that road every day absent the beach, whether it be exercise in the morning or in the evening. As far as parking downtown, the restricted parking would be in front of the stores, and right directly behind the southern part of the northern part of Stop and Shop's parking lot, and the southern part of Route 1. That's restricted also. But I haven't received many complaints other than the letters that are sent from people that live in the area that are concerned about the influx of people to the town beaches.
Okay.
We have there's a heavy police presence on those roads every weekend, in addition to daily, Monday through Friday. I called enough folks that most people that call or send a letter, I'll call them back. I talked to one gentleman last night, I think he used the word that I like to use, extraordinary police presence. So, I mean, you can't say that the cops aren't there doing their job, but I'm very careful we're not going to be stopping people and asking them where they're from, because I'm not going to, that's seizing them under a law enforcement color of authority. We're not going to do that.
And I apologize if you thought that I was saying that the police weren't doing enough, because
No, I didn't think that. I didn't think that, Aaron.
Absolutely
Aaron, I didn't think that at all.
Okay, because I think that they are. They're doing a great job. I see them all over. I was just asking about that. It's concerning because that road is pretty dangerous. And that corner on East Wharf.
Oh, without a doubt. I concur with you there, but I think enough people are going slower to slowing down on the roads. They realize there's a lot of people. I mean, people are 2-3 deep on north to southbound lanes of all the beach roads. I mean, we see people come in from out of town, and you know, we engage them in conversation. We don't directly ask, you know, where you're from, what are you doing? This comes out in a conversation, but listen, they're going out to the beaches. They're getting dropped off, and they're parking the cars wherever they can find a place to park. That's not going to get them towed or tagged.
Right.
Well, I think that was part of the reasoning we put some of those sandwich boards down there as a to discourage people. Like, hey, if you park here and try to walk up the road, you may not get in still. You know, Birnbaum is probably the biggest road now, because there was very little on-street parking this past weekend. You know, signs had gone up, and I think at least that was my observation. But Jack was the one dealing with, you know, his people are out actually policing it. But Birnbaum is also in our business district, and you know, it affects a lot more people if you start locking down parking there and restricting it.
Unless we have permits, right?
I mean, could we do something like that? Yeah, I mean, as it is, like, once again,
Right.
the executive order allows the LTA to identify streets for residents only. That process would have been a whole nother process, a long process to do if we were going to create parking for residents only long term. It's a temporary fix, and the police will not be ticketing residents because of this executive order. Could we, you know, I could issue another executive order, something to do with hourly parking. I don't know. I mean, it could go on forever, but we were trying to address specific issues that I know was existing in that neighborhood. So, and, you know, and then the capacity limitations was something that it was unclear whether in normal times you could do that by telling people there are too many people on the beach. You know, it was unclear. And the advice from council was to issue an executive order because you are stopping people access to, you know, a public point on the shoreline. So, yes, Chief. Yep.
My concern, and it's always been since the beginning of this, is that I'm trying to mitigate us so that we don't get in trouble, that the community doesn't get in trouble, and reflecting back on the Greenwich decision, Fairfield, Groton Long Point, access to the beach, public access. So we're doing our best to kind of work around this so that we do not violate what the court language states that we have to comply with. Now, I know there's other towns that have taken some initiatives based on COVID. I think it's a dangerous place to go. I think that we can mitigate this, work our way through it. I don't think it's going to be any worse than the next couple of weekends. And then as we ramp down, and I don't know if we're returning to school, but I think that we'll find our way through this. But I think it's very important that we comply with the law and not violate people's rights.
And I think there's some other operational things that we can do that we, just by observing what happened this past weekend and the weekend before, that we're going to work on in terms of, you know, managing drop-offs, because, you know, that was enabling people to drop off and walk in. But at the same point, we were concerned about public safety, people doing it on the road. So we're going to work through that. Stepping up the enforcement of, some people are parking early before, you know, the gate goes up at 7 at East Wharf so people can exercise. And some people are now actually going early that don't have stickers and then just staying there all day. So we've got to start enforcing that. You know, and I know there's some quality of life issues at East Wharf this last weekend with some of the people that were there that we can just address with, you know, telling them it's not allowed at the beach. So, you know, that's kind of where we are on beach policies. It's been a roller coaster ride, I think, for everybody. But I do appreciate all the cooperation with the Board of, Ed Dowling on this, and the chief, and and Scott. I think his team has done an amazing job being frontline with the public that has grown more and more irate and impatient, I think, with how the summer is evolving. So I think his team has done a fantastic job. So
On a positive note, I have heard that having lifeguards and gate guards back is comforting to people. So I think that was a very good step, and I think people are happy with that.
I think so too. I think everybody's very happy with the staffing. We've gotten actually, a few nice emails. I actually got a flower delivered today from a resident thanking me for all the work we're doing at the beaches. So that was very nice. So that's been good. I think the general public has been very pleased. I think there are, though, some frustrations when residents get turned away. You show up at 2:00 on a Saturday or Sunday and you get turned away from the beach. It's just an unfortunate reality of the number of people. Scott, just one other thing on here, because I wanted to see where we were on beach pass sales. Were you able to get that data?
Yeah, we're let's see, about 5,200 total passes sold. And the breakdown is 2,568 adult passes, 2,545 senior passes, and 87 veteran passes.
Okay.
So we're over the number of passes we sold last year. So our revenue reflects that. We're up at 113,210 right now, which is higher than last year.
And there were more adult passes, right? Because I know seniors.
Yeah, we're actually ahead of the seniors this year. So younger families are buying multiple passes.
Okay, great. So, and we don't unfortunately have historic data on cars or on walk-ins to compare, to a normal year. But I think we're seeing it with the just the flow of people in general. So, any more questions on beach policy? No?
Going once, going twice.
Okay.
Oh, I do, sorry. Do we have a sense, and I'm just curious about what other towns are restricting, or how many other towns are restricting non-residents?
We've looked at that in general. I don't have like a data sheet for you on that right now.
Okay, I was just curious because I've seen
it is basically, though, my understanding is that many are doing capacity limitations. I would say a handful are doing the non-residents only on certain days. And only 3 towns are doing prohibiting walk-ins of non-residents. Only 3, and those just came out, in the last week.
Okay.
Yeah, they're
Thank
basically, like Peggy says, they're basically going by the beach capacity standard that is out there.
Mhm.
Guilford allows residents and non-residents, but cuts it off at their capacity. So.
And Clinton's doing the same as well.
Right.
And Old Saybrook's doing that. I think Westbrook's doing the same. So, and then other towns are doing like reservation systems where you reserve a slot and you get your window and then you have to leave. So there's a lot of different ideas out there that, we've been kind of exploring if we can't keep this down to a manageable level and a safe level for the community.
I think that's our overall goal. We want to keep it safe.
Mm-hmm.
I can't help but ask, but what have we learned this summer that we might ask the Beach and Rec Commission to think about for next summer? whether COVID is with us or not. What are we learning? What I keep hearing is there's only so much beach. We have a limit on capacity that perhaps we've never had to confront frequently in the past. But if trends continue and more people want to move out this way and use our beach and not take long vacations, is it likely this is going to be an annual frustration for future boards of selectmen?
I hope not. The only thought that I would have is that if it continues this trend, we may have to limit, and I'm just throwing this out there, to limit the number of passes that are sold. I mean, we have 18,000 people in the community, and if all 18,000 want to come down to the beach, they're not going to make it. You know, we just don't have that capacity at our beaches. West and East are very small. Surf Club is getting smaller with the tide rise. You know, it's gonna be problematic down the road as everything continues to raise up.
Just incents people to get going early in the day.
Yep.
Get down there.
Get your 2 hours of sun and then
Get out.
Yeah, I think, Al, it's definitely going to be a bigger discussion, you know, once things settle down for next year. I think we have learned some things and we'll get it. We'll try to, you know, always improve, continuous improvement, you know. So I know
Obviously, I wanted to raise it now because before long, we're going to be in budgeting season. And if we need to recognize a different way of doing beach business next summer, I hope it gets built into the budget.
Okay, yeah, no, I know. I think that is going to be obviously a discussion topic. I think the public has been very demanding about, you know, this is why they pay taxes and they want service. So I think it's probably better we move on because we have a lot to go still. So the next item is discuss and take action to approve entering into a lease purchase agreement for the purpose of financing 422 Chevy Tahoe with upfit kits for the police department, and to authorize the first selectman to sign the same. I have a motion.
So moved.
Motion to approve.
Okay, and a second?
Second.
Second.
Okay, discussion. Chief, would you like to review this?
Sure. This is the third phase of vehicle replacement program we started approximately almost 10 years ago. And what it is these are 4 vehicles to replace 4 current vehicles we have, which are now high mileage. One, I will not trade the vehicles in. Some will be used to go to the SRO program. Some will be used for highway construction projects. If they're dangerous, we're not going to put them on the road, and we're also not going to put high-end repairs into them. This is how we've done in the past and gleaned some additional years by doing that out of our regular fleet. I try to keep the regular fleet frontline cars as the newer ones. The vehicles are coming out of Massachusetts. It's the state Connecticut bid and Mass bid, although we're under what the bid price is. And the lease is 3.25%. That was the lowest of the 4 lease quotes that we received. It's the Republic First National Bank out of, I believe it's Ohio. And they were advertising it in the government channels, leases. I looked into it and I spoke with Stacy and Kristen, and they had a discussion further with the company, and the rates are pretty reasonable. This is based on a 4-year term. We own the vehicles at the end of the lease. It's similar to the other leases we have, with the exception of half the fleet has exceeded the 4 years we've had for 5 years. So we gleaned an extra year out of the vehicles by doing this replacement program over the last 10. And this is budgeted money in our vehicle replacement fund.
Okay.
I wanted to ask Bruce if that's a good deal. terms of the financing.
He's
I don't
now
know,
our
we have
car guy.
0% going on right now.
Why didn't you pick
Yeah.
a Range Rover, Chief?
I think the fleet would look good in Range Rover Sports. That would match up.
You just had to come in at 3.0 versus 3.25.
Or how about all electric Jaguars?
He doesn't know what to do with that. Chief, what can I ask a naive question? Why Tahoes? Just out of curiosity.
Well, I was trying to get I like the Ford product, the Utility Pursuit. The problem with Ford is that when they tooled up for 2021, they had a quality problem and they shut the line down, and then COVID struck. So I will not see Ford production on police vehicles to commence until after September, and we wouldn't see any vehicles to after January. So I'm compelled to go with they matched the pricing of the Ford product with the Tahoes. We have two presently which run very well. And we purchased in 2016. The one I operated is in 2016. The one the sergeants have is 2016. It's a pretty rugged vehicle. Because cops come in all sizes and shapes, we like the smaller vehicles also, the utilities. So that was what drove. I went searching around looking for an inventory of vehicles left over. There wasn't a Ford to be found. So, but I did find that when I called law enforcement for Chevy, they said we have 41 Tahoes in New England at last year's pricing. So that's what brought us to it.
And that's not going to get any better. Tight inventory is going to get tighter and tighter.
Yeah, and
Just because manufacturing is being shut down.
Being impacted for sure, right?
Hmm.
Any more questions on this? And Stacy's on as well if there's a. No? All right, okay, are we ready to vote? Okay. Okay, all in favor of approving entering into a lease purchase agreement for the purpose of financing 4 2020 Chevy Tahoes with upfit kits for the police department, please say aye.
Aye.
Okay, aye. All right, opposed, abstain. Okay, it passes. Thank you very much on that.
thank you.
Next is citizens' comments, which it looks as we have no citizens. Is that correct?
I don't think so.
Okay. All right, so then I guess the next thing is I always forget this, a motion to move into executive session and invite Deb Millardo, Ed Dowling, Chief Drum, and Stacy Noblitz into the executive session.
So moved.
And Lauren?
And Lauren, yes, I forget. Well, Lauren is always there. So yes, and Lauren. Okay, can I have a second?
Second.
Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Okay, great. All right, so we are moving to executive session. Go ahead, Lauren.
Yep, so just for anybody watching this video after the fact, you will notice that the recording will stop at this point and pick back up before we adjourn the meeting. Just let me get you off of you.